Carson McKee, and I'm going to be presenting how it's made, the flute. So, we're going to get started. I'm Carson McKee, like I already said. Technical difficulties. There we go. What we'll talk about the raw materials, how it's made, and other special things that are like fun facts and what like the design criteria was for the flute. First of all, raw materials. The body of the flute, is made of nickel and silver, and sometimes platinum. It's an alloy because you're not gonna have a pure silver flute or a pure nickel flute. You're gonna have an alloy. The keys are all made of the same alloy as the flute. Also would be weird. Also, some keys are more malleable than others, like because that's how metals are. But it's like an alloy, so it's more strong because of the silver and nickel alloy. Pads are made of cork and felt, and the springs are bronze, steel, or gold. Now, these ones are supposed to not be as firm because they need to get the job done by having enough tension to press the key down and have it come back up, but not like resist your fingers so much. Fact, the pads of the flute are actually very expensive and can get up to $90 each. So, don't really want to repair that too much often. Step 1, die casting. The process of die casting is forcing molten metal under pressure. The metal is then cut into keys. The other options are stamping the keys out with a stamper and then like cutting them out and trimming them just to make sure that they're not edgy and going to cut your finger open while you're performing. Fluxing and soldering is the next step. So the flux solution is a bunch of chemicals that will protect the flute and the keys when they are getting soldered. Then they solder it, they get everything on, and they're going to attach these rods to the flute, because if you don't have the rods, then you can't really flip the keys without them falling off your instrument. And then they polish it to make sure it looks good, because you don't really want to go up to a performance with a really bad flute. Pads. To make pads, you need the cork and felt. The pads are cut out to match the size of the keys, and then they are attached right into it. So, forming the tone holes. The drills they drill down into the flute, and when they come back up, they raise some of the metal around it as well, so that the pad doesn't have to curve in a weird way to adapt to the body of the flute. Instead, the tone holes are just raised out of the body to get the keys in where they're supposed to be and not have to do that bendy stuff. Because if it's bendy, it could possibly get more bent, and that is a bad experience for somebody who's a musician like me. For instance, when my key broke on my clarinet and I couldn't play it. And then they smooth the edges so that you don't get those nasty cuts or break those $90 felt pads. Attaching the keys, the rods are put onto the flute and the keys are attached with screws and pins. If you have a flute, there are on the edge of each rods and keys, there are screws that hold the rods in place, and they are soldered onto the flute with little stands that they sit on. The springs add tension to the keys so that your key doesn't stay stuck down. The mouthpiece. The last step is to solder this little thing right here onto the head joint. That is for your lip to go on, and that's the last final step. And then the design, for the criteria of the design, is to make sure that it's airtight, but not too hard for the musician to take apart, because you don't want to put this in a really long case. If it's a small instrument, that can be taken apart into 3 individual pieces, and you can get it apart easily to make sure that you can get it apart easily while maintaining it being airtight. Whoop. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes?
Okay, I noticed you used a lot of big words that me am not familiar with. Could you go back and...
Where would you like me to go to?
I don't know where it was. Wait, go back to tone holes.
Okay, those are right here.
I noticed you didn't define that.
The tone holes are the little holes that are in the flute that the keys are covering to make the different sounds. And the tone holes are throughout the entire instrument, with the exception of the headpiece, or the head joint, as flute players call it.
So when they drill the tone holes,
Yes?
if this is the flute, they drill like this. They
drill each individual tone hole. Even though some tone holes are bigger than others, they drill it and then they raise it when it comes back up.
That picture kind of looks like it's drilling into the actual flute and not a tone hole.
Yeah. Well, when you are drilling into the tone, when you are doing the tone hole and drilling into the tone, you are drilling into the flute.
Yeah, but that shows like drilling.
It looks like that is a picture of just drilling into a piece of metal, not necessarily a tube like a flute.
Yes. When I was looking for pictures to put in this, I looked for a ton of things. Like when I went to look for the flux solution with a flute in it, I couldn't find that. There was just a whole bunch of like needles and tubes that you like squirt out the flux solution into.
Do you know what's in the flux solution?
I looked it up on one of my sites. Forgot the name of the site. There was just like it's chemicals. It's not like just water that comes out. I don't know what the chemicals are.
Okay.
I need to look into that.
So this, the word that you are pronouncing soldering is actually pronounced soldering.
Soldering.
And it is, it's something that is used to, adhere to metal pieces to each other. It's different from welding, because welding uses just the heat, right? Do you use, like a lead when you're welding as well? Yes. I don't know what the difference is really between welding and soldering, but soldering uses a small iron, and welding uses like...
I looked up soldering on the internet, and when I looked at the images, there was a whole bunch of like needles with smoke coming out of it on circuit boards. So I was figuring that you're not going to get like a blowtorch and fry your circuit board.
Soldering is for more delicate work.
Yes.
Like a flute.
Like a flute.
I thought your presentation was excellent.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
There was one process.
Die casting?
Well, yeah, there was something.
That was one of my anticipated questions.
Good. So you said at one point you can either die cast or stamp. Do you know why you would choose one over the other?
So the website that I looked on said it depends on availability. If you can die cast it, go ahead. Just put it in the die caster and then cut it into the keys. Trim the keys out. So I think the die casting device is like a mold, and then you like inject the metal into it and heat it, and then you stamp it out. It's a heavy cutter that presses down hard onto the keys and then cuts those out, and then once again those things get trimmed so that they aren't pokey and scratchy.
Do you know which one might be more expensive?
Die casting, probably.
Yeah, how come?
because you need to like have it's more like not it's more complex of a project to do. If you need to have the heat to do so. Oh, stamping also probably does cost money because you have to get the metal to stamp down onto the other metals.
So think about how much time, because time is also a commodity. Time is
Yeah.
money, as they say. So how much time does die casting take versus stamping for if you wanted to do one flute and if you wanted to do 5 flutes?
I'm not aware of that.
Well, if you're stamping something, you said you're just pressing
You're
it
just
down.
pressing it down.
So then you could lift it back up and move your
Yeah.
conveyor belt and press down the next one. But if you're die casting something, you have your cast that you fill with the liquid metal
Yeah.
and wait for it to cool.
Yes.
So when can you use that cast again?
A while.
Oh, yes.
But when can you use the stamp again?
When the next thing slides up on the
Almost
conveyor
right
belt.
away.
Yeah.
So from a time standpoint, if you want to make a lot of flutes, you have to have a lot of casts.
Yes.
Which
So the
increases
casting
the
would
cost.
be much more expensive.
One other step is if you are going to die cast something, typically it's not like you just make the die cast part. You actually have to take it somewhere else and have it machined as well, because the surface of a die cast part is pretty rough, and I don't see very many rough surfaces on your flute. So there's some other processes there to make it.
like after the die casting, you trim it down.
That's exactly right.
always what they do after they cut out the
Nice.
keys.
it sounds like you learned a lot about the manufacturing process.
What's that picture of? Do you know?
So that
It literally
looks
says
like a
die
car
casting.
part.
I would guess.
An inline
I would
6.
bet money with that.
Yeah, that's a car part,
Mhm.
probably.
Nice job, Carson.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Both of you guys did great.
Way to
today.
go.